Megyn Kelly has become part of the news more than she would like during this past campaign and the highly publicized events at Fox as well. She's the author of the new memoir, Settle for More, and I sat down with her in New York. Megyn Kelly, welcome.
Thank you.
Donald Trump was courting you early on. He sent you notes. He offered to pay for a hotel weekend, which you, of course, declined. Then a few days before the famous first debate in Cleveland, he's supposed to appear on your show. He was ticked off at an earlier segment, and he called you. What did he say?
So I write about this in the book, Settle for More, and you are in this scene. The opening chapter of the book is a real page-turner, and there's a scene in which Howie Kurtz comes over to me right before that presidential debate and says, "What's going on?" And I say, "If only I could tell you, you would realize it's the biggest story in the country."
I like the way you worked me in. That was very good.
Well, I remember that moment distinctly because at that moment I thought it was a huge deal that the Republican frontrunner was threatening me, had threatened to unleash his beautiful Twitter account against me 4 days before a presidential debate. Little did I know how that would pale in comparison to what would ultimately happen. So what happened was Mr. Trump was upset with the segment I had done on the Kelly file the previous week, and that Monday he insisted that I call him, the Monday before the Thursday debate. So I did. He expressed his displeasure about the segment I had done. I said he should have been thanking me because the segment actually I thought was very good for him.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't see it that way. He told me I was a disgrace and that I ought to be ashamed of myself. And then he told me I almost unleashed my beautiful Twitter account against you, and I still may.
And I still may. So when you asked the famous question at the debate in Cleveland about his demeaning comments about women, you write that you had the impression that he knew this was coming. What gave you that impression?
No. What I write was that the day before the debate, he had called one of our Fox News executives and said that he had heard my first question for him was going to be a very pointed question. But he did not know what the question was.
Certain TV hosts were in the tank for Donald Trump, you say, to the point where you say that they would arrange with Trump in advance to ask him certain critical questions or do certain hits on him so they would appear to have some credibility.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting that they were play acting?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
It was acting.
And this was in more than one network, you say?
Yes.
But you can't tell us who?
No, because these were off-the-record conversations that I was privy to that I'm not at liberty to reveal. So while I'd love to tell you who it was, I have this information, and I'm not allowed to name the names. But trust me, this did happen, and it's been confirmed to me by more than one television executive.
During the many months that Donald Trump was going after you following the debate on Twitter, public comments, all kinds of language, lightweight bimbo, and it went on, it seemed relentless at the time. At the same time, some of his fans, many of his fans, were attacking you in very crude language on Twitter, sexual language, violent language. There were death threats. You had security. You still bear the scars from that?
No. I mean, I'm fine, and I think Donald Trump and I are fine. And I'll say this, the vast majority of Donald Trump supporters have been lovely to me and watch the Kelly file, and we're all good. They get it. They understand what a journalist is supposed to do.
But how do you go through something like that and then just leave it behind?
I think I'm pretty resilient. I mean, I write about this in the book. One of the purposes of writing Settle for More was to take issue with this so-called cupcake generation, that's what I've dubbed them, who believe they're entitled to their safe spaces, they're entitled to never be offended, they're all about PC culture. And having grown up in a different era, I really have a problem with this because I think we are wussifying our children. And that does not comport with real life. We're not letting them build the muscles they're going to need to function in real life, where there is upset, there is offense. There are people who behave badly at times. So I lived a life in which I had plenty of adversity, as detailed in my book, from bullying a couple of times in my life to, a divorce, to the loss of my father, to issues when I practiced law, and all of that served me well in the end because it helped me deal with the people who were very unhappy with my questioning of Donald Trump, and it helped me sort of categorize it correctly, which is it didn't change who I was, it was just an irritant that needed to be dealt with.
But although the press called this a feud, you were mostly not fighting back because you didn't want to become part of the ongoing story with the guy who became the Republican frontrunner. At the same time, you say that there were debates between you and your producers about the show and whether you were being too easy on Trump, too hard on Trump. That must have been difficult in light of the fact that you were so much in the news.
Well, it was odd because my team is amazing, and my executive producer, Tom Lowell, is amazing, as you know. And we just held steady. You know, we were steady at the helm, trying not to veer off course from doing fair and balanced coverage. We didn't want to be too hard on Trump, to retaliate against him for what he was doing to me. We didn't want to be too soft on him, to try to curry favor with the man who's coming after me. And I think we did a great job, I really do, and I credit my team for that. But the nights where my relationship with Donald Trump was national news were bizarre. I mean, everyone in the country was talking about me and Donald Trump, and we were talking about policy or something else having nothing to do with that, because we didn't want to shine a light on that story, and it would have been too weird and too meta.
You eventually sought the Trump Tower meeting with him. You got a hug. You got to interview him for your broadcast special, and then you moved on.
Yep.
Are there things you admire about Donald Trump?
Plenty of things. I think what Donald Trump's detractors don't know about him, in addition to the fact that they now know he can connect with millions of Americans in a way that many, you know, in New York City and San Francisco might not be able to, that he understands them in that way. I think he's got a lot of charm. I mean, if he wants to charm you, you're going to be charmed. And I always had a very nice relationship with him, and I think actually we're back on good terms now. It was just that weirdness of the campaign where things went south. But I think he's magnanimous. I think he's a very good father. I love how his children reflect on him. I think he's got a great relationship with Melania. And my own experience with Donald Trump is he is funny, he's quick, he's smart, he's a straight and direct communicator, and trust me, I think a lot of people would be surprised at how much they'd like him if they spent some one-on-one time with him.
Right, but isn't it a little weird now for you to be covering President Trump? And do you think there's any sort of warning for the press in the way he not only went after all kinds of news organizations, journalists by name, but the way he went after you?
So no, it's not weird for me to be covering him at all. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be riveting. And I think we're really going to have to steel our spines in covering President Trump, because if he decides to go after another journalist as he did me while he's in the Oval Office, it's going to have real First Amendment concerns. And journalists and their news organizations are going to have to stand strong in the face of that kind of pressure.
More now from my conversation with Megyn Kelly. There are points in this book, some about Trump, but some of it much earlier in your life, where you describe dealing with raw emotions and sometimes crying. Seems might be a little at odds with your battle-hardened image, but you put it all out there.
Oh, gosh. I mean, honestly, I cry all the time. I mean, not like on the air, because that would be weird, but I actually don't mind crying. I feel like it's a release of the pain that you may be feeling in a given situation. And, I mean, the truth is, I know people see me as this sort of tough newswoman who is, some people have said, fearless. But I am not fearless. I have plenty of fears. And the book talks about sort of mustering the courage to get through them. And listen, there are many nights over this past year where I cried. There have been many nights over my life where I've been really sad. I've dealt with a lot of tough times. But I do believe it's self-defeating to wallow in one's perceived victimhood.
During the months of battles with Trump, Fox News chairman Roger Ailes defended you, you say, but he also had to balance the network's interest in covering a presidential candidate. Was it hard for you in writing this book to go public with what you have now acknowledged, that a decade ago you were a young reporter, you were sexually harassed by Roger Ailes? You say you detailed in the book, he still denies it. And then that you volunteered when the investigation came up this summer that led to Ailes leaving the company, that you wanted to tell your story. Was it hard to relive that?
Well, it wasn't pleasant. But honestly, I talked a lot about it with the Murdochs, about whether I should write about what had happened this past summer at Fox News and what had happened to me 10 years earlier. And I am proud to tell you that they believed, as I did, that it ought to be written about and that sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think for too long women have kept quiet about this kind of thing, just as I did, out of fear of being labeled a whiner or a complainer or someone who couldn't get along with the boys. And I wrote about it because I know that there are other women out there, Howie, who are wrestling with this.
At all kinds of companies, of course.
Everywhere, everywhere, news organizations and beyond, and they don't know what to do about it. And my own experience in speaking with women here to whom this happened is that they all felt that they were the only one. They all felt that they had done something. They were self-blaming, you know, like, I must have invited it somehow. And I want women to know it can happen even to somebody who had practiced law for 9 years. You know, I was new to this company, but I had practiced law for 9 years when this happened to me. So it can happen to anybody. And look, when it happened to me, I made a record of it. I retained a lawyer. I did tell a supervisor, and that person advised me to just try to avoid him for the next foreseeable future, and I did, and that worked. And Roger and I went on to have a healthy, professional working relationship.
And you did a lot for your career.
A lot for my career, and when I wrote the book, I thought, you know, do I go back and take that out of there now that this has come out, that we did have this other chapter of our lives? And I felt it was important to leave the good stuff in there so they could see it's complicated.
When people look back at the last year and a half, and boy, it's been an intense year and a half for you, they say, well, you know, you had these battles with Trump, but you became internationally famous. You're on all these magazine covers. People talk about how much money you make, I mean, all of that. And they say, wow, it was pretty good for her. Mm-hmm. But you know, at the time, it must not have felt as good as it might, looking back in retrospect. You weren't trying to necessarily use it as a brand-building exercise.
No, I mean, I'll say this. I feel incredibly fortunate to have the job I have, you know, and to have the life I have. Incredibly fortunate. But it's not all luck. And the book details the value of hard work. You know, I busted my tail to get to where I am, and I didn't come from any money or any circles of power. I had none of those advantages, you know, but I had parents who loved me and helped me believe in myself.
And on that note, Megyn Kelly, thanks for sitting down with us.
Thanks, Howie. Great to see you.